Hello, Professor. This is Team 100, and my name is Chen Yuliao.
Hi, my name is Carlos Rich.
Hi everybody, I'm Karen Foster.
I'm going to first to do a presentation with chapter 2 and a little of chapter 3. So let's see. The chapter 3 name is Information Technology Project Management, and the organization projects must operate with the organization environment. The way operate and manage the project should be from system point of view, taking a holistic view of the execution of the project. Similar management must make sure projects continue to support current business needs. The holistic approach is called system thinking, and a system approach emerged in the 1950s to describe a more analytical approach to management the problem solving. The approach has the three parts, which include the system philosophy, system analysis, and system management. The approach that suggests will be using three service or three service model to manage the whole system. The three systems are business, technology, and organization. So basically, we need to look at three different areas. Those different areas will assist together. When integrated properly or correctly, they will create a successful business in each area. We ask the certain question and look at the answer or look for the answer what will satisfy the integration area. The gray area here in the middle, if we can find the answer for the questions, then can satisfy the overlap of this area together, then we will have a successful integration for the organization's business and the technology. So we have organization, business, and the technology together. There are three basically organizational structures. So if we go back to the structure issues or structure form and look at the structure for the company, what are the structures? The different structures. It could be function, it could be a project, or could be matrix. And this slide shows the different structure and the hierarchies of those structure and the figure shows who will report to whom in each of these structures. This metric in the side shows the project charters and their relation on the organizational level. We can see how much also environment and control has the project manager and the functional manager in each area. And we can see in some areas the project manager has more control than the functional manager. On the other side, we see that the functional manager has more control than the project manager in other areas. So it depends on which area we are addressing, and we can see that in some areas the functional manager has more control than the project managers. Then I will talk about organizational culture. The organizational culture is a set of shared assumptions, values, and behaviors that characterize the action of an organization. Many experts believe the underlying cause many companies' problems, not the structure or staff, but the culture. Even with one organization, one department's culture may be different from another department's culture, especially with the technology. The organization culture has 10 charities, and the 10 charities is the member identity, growth in faith, people focus, unity in Christian, culture, risk tolerance, reward seeker, conflict tolerance, means and orientation, open systems focus. This is one of the charities for the culture. The the identity of each one within an organization. The group influences how to work in groups, in teams together, how to collaborate, There are people we focus on the person, employees, and how we give the ability to take the problem decision and the unit integration. Integrating the different units together and what that way they are communicating with each other, and then how we can control the different processes within the organization, the risk factors, and the reward system. We will end a rewarding system in a company, in the organization, which will increase the morale of the employees. If there was a conflict, how to solve it? How could we mitigate it, reduce any other problems or issues that might happen? That means an orientation, so we need to concentrate on this kind of orientations to make sure that the employees understand what's going on with the organization. The open systems focus. So all this assistance in the culture of the organization and forming the culture of the organization. The IT project will be most successful in an organizational culture where these items are stronger or balanced. It depends on which charities are we talking about. Some of them we need stronger, others we need them to be balanced with each other. And the chapter 3 name is the project management processing process. A process is a series of activity, tests, or actions that will be directed to produce a particular result. Project management can be viewed as the number of interlinked or connected processes, as we stated in the process lecture. We started talking about different process groups or phases, which includes the intention, the planning, execution, monitoring, and the control, which is one phase, and goes as the last phase. So we have those 5 main phases in project management. And the table on this slide and the next slide shows the activity mapping from the different place to the different projects. Management knowledge area as we can see in the table on the left side. We have different knowledge area intention, management, scope, management, time management, cost management, and so on in the next slide, and how they mapped to the different phases, and we can see the different processes that can be identified related to each group. So that's all my presentation. Next, we'll continue to the chapter 3 and chapter 4. Thanks.
I'm going to be doing chapter 4, project integration management. Looking at the first slide, we're going to talk about project integration management. These include 7 key things to do, which is number 1, developing the project charter. Number 2, developing the project management plan. Number 3, directing and managing project work. Number 4, managing project knowledge. Number 5, monitoring and controlling project work. Number 6, performing integrated change control. And number 7, closing the project phase. So we're going to be taking a look at each of these today. If you look over here on the right box, project integration management has a lot of interface management. And for this, you need communication and good relationships, because you're going to be identifying and managing the points of interaction between various elements of the project and trying to manage those to be the most efficient and the most productive that they can be. And having strong communication is key for that. Moving on to the next slide here, which is strategic planning. Strategic planning includes determining long-term objectives by analyzing the organization and business environment using SWOT analysis, predicting future trends, and projecting for needs. SWOT analysis stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. The strengths and weaknesses are going to be analyzed according to how the organization is doing, and the opportunities and threats are going to be analyzed for the business environment. A very popular way to do a SWOT analysis is to use mind mapping, which we can see over here on the right, which is a great way to think more non-linearly. Next, we're going to look at identifying potential projects, and it is highly recommended to create a committee to help make this decision versus making it on your own. If you're making a IT related project decision, it's very important to include non-IT people in the decision because it helps the IT department stay aligned with company goals. And if we look over here on the right, you can see the information technology planning stages. Specifically, they're organized hierarchically. So we'll start here at the bottom with resource allocation, then moving up to project planning. After that is business area analysis, and then information technology strategy planning. Methods for selecting projects, there are a few. First is focusing on broad organizational needs. And this focuses on 3 questions, which is the project needed? Can the project be funded? And is there the will to complete the project? So these questions are usually asked to the people who are working in the department the project affects most, and they can give a really good pulse on if the project should be done or not, as far as if it's needed and if there's a will to complete it. The next is categorizing IT projects, and this is a bit more of a reactive approach compared to the other method. This focuses on coming up and selecting projects based on things that happen. So problems, opportunities, and directives. Directives are something that's mandated maybe by upper management, the government, or another outside influence. The next way you can select a project is by performing a net present value or other financial analyses. And this is looking at the expected cash flows and discounting them using the discount rate and seeing if there's going to be an expected gain or loss. This is a great way to see if there's going to be funding and if the project's going to be profitable. But it should be careful using this because it is expected cash flows, and the discount rate that is chosen and the cash flows that are chosen can highly affect the outcome of the analysis. The last 2 are more inclusive of all 3, kind of bringing them all together. A weighted scoring model selects specific criteria and gives them a weight, and then assigns each of those criteria a score for each company. And the balanced scorecard is a much more inclusive and broader, more full decision-making tool for selecting projects. Next, we're going to look at developing a project charter. This is very important. So after a decision is made on the project, the next step is to develop the project charter and make it official. So the project charter is a document that formally recognizes the existence of a project and provides direction on the project's objectives and management. And this project charter contains key items such as the start and end date, the schedule milestones, budget information, project objectives, main project success criteria, approach, and the roles and responsibilities of those involved in the project. Now we're going to look at developing a management plan. A project management plan is a document used to coordinate all project planning documents and help guide a project's execution and control. So these plans should be very dynamic and very flexible because it's very likely that the project and the environment will change over the time that the project is being done. These should include overall scope, schedule, and cost baselines. So if you look over here at some of the common elements, you'll see that it needs an overview. It needs to go over the project organization. It needs to have management and technical processes, the work to be performed, schedule and budget information, as we said, and referencing the other planning documents. We'll move right on to directing and managing project work. There's a few ways to do this. First, coordinating and planning execution. Biggest way to avoid problems in this area is that those who do the work should plan the work. Next, we move on to providing a strong leadership and supportive culture. This is very important because a supportive culture is going to allow employees who are unsure to come to superiors or to you to make sure they're pursuing the right course and hopefully prevent a lot of costly mistakes. And providing strong leadership gives employees and people working on the project a clear directive of what they need to work on and what they need to be doing. Next, capitalizing on product and application area knowledge. This mainly focuses on that the project manager is usually a very skilled or experienced person and taking full advantage of that experience. So if you're a project manager who has a strong engineering background working on an engineering project, you're going to be able to give a lot of good insights into the engineering side of it. And that shouldn't be wasted. That should be used. You should just be careful not to let that take over your other responsibilities as a project manager. And project execution tools and techniques. So real quick, expert judgment is trusting your experts, meetings, making sure everyone's on the same page, and then using project management information systems such as Microsoft Project or something as simple as just a NAT chart. Next, we're going to move on to managing project knowledge. So there's two types of knowledge, explicit knowledge and tacit knowledge. Explicit knowledge is what we're used to knowing. That stuff that's explained in encyclopedias, stuff in textbooks. It's easy to communicate, easy to store, easy to distribute. Tacit knowledge is a little bit harder to express and highly personal. Some examples are beliefs, insights, and experience. So kind of like the sixth sense of the business world. It's project knowledge is very hard to influence and control, especially tacit knowledge. But a great way to ensure that tacit knowledge is being passed down from your experienced employees to your less experienced ones is through mentorships. Performing integrated change control is very important because change happens a lot throughout the project's life cycle. So integrated change control involves identifying, evaluating, and managing changes throughout the project lifecycle, and it has three main objectives. So the first is influencing factors to ensure that changes are beneficial. So when something changes, something's going to have to take a hit, and this is deciding which is going to take a hit and how much in each category. And usually the categories that are hit are scope, time, cost, and quality. The last two are determining that a change has occurred and managing the actual changes as they occur. Finally, we'll talk about closing projects. So here the main tools include judgment, data analysis, and meetings. So you want to make sure that you're making good judgment decisions here at the end of the project, analyzing all the data thoroughly and correctly, and making sure that your team is on the same page to completing everything on time. It's important to make updates to project documents to confirm accuracy and to finalize. And it's also very important to work with the project sponsor to ensure that they receive delivery of the results they expected to be completed. A final final report should be issued, and then we talk real quick about organizational process asset updates. And this is basically organizing all the information that was created by the project in a way that's going to be useful for people in that same company to use in the future. Thank you for this part of the presentation, and we're going to move on now to Chapter 5, Project Scope Management.
I'll be doing Chapter 5, Project Scope Management. And a second to get over here. Okay. So what is project scope management? Scope involves all work towards creating products and processes. Project scope management is the processes defining and controlling what work will or will not be included in a project. Factors associated with this is user involvement, clear business objectives, and optimized scope. Poor project scope management is also one of the key reasons why projects fail. For IT projects, it's important for a good project scope management to have strong user involvement, executive support, and a clear statement of requirements and a process for managing these scope changes. So 6 main processes of this are planning, scope management, collecting requirements, defining the scope, creating the web-based structure, validating the scope, and controlling the scope. Planning the scope is how the scope manages throughout the project. This is the first step, and this is where the team reviews information, uses expert judgment, meetings to help create a scope management plan and a requirements management plan. Scope management plan is a subsidiary part of the project, and it's based off the needs of the project. A detailed kind of project scope. This is one of the 5 under scope management plan. Generally includes how to. It's kind of the guidelines, how much detail is needed for the deliverable, creating a WBS, maintain and improve a WBS, obtain formal acceptance, and control requests for changes to the project scope. Continuing on to the requirements management plan, or what is a requirement? A requirement is a condition or capability that is necessary to be presented in a product, service, or result to satisfy a business need. Also include qualified and documented needs and expectations for the stakeholders, customer, sponsor, whatever it needs to be. And that includes all the 5 below. Collecting requirements is definitely one of the most difficult parts of the process. Is not defining these requirements could backtrack and can consume a lot of project costs and time. This is important to review the project charter and meet kind of with stakeholders and kind of figure out what needs to be done and what is being asked of. It's much cheaper to find out this before going into planning all of this, because like building a house, if the example in the book, build a house and you put the walls and the windows and they're incorrect, it's going to take forever, and it's going to be very costly to make those changes make changes to that. Waste collect requirements, can interview kind of that way stuff. There's definitely many ways to collect this, but people who work on these software projects, it's very difficult defining and managing these requirements. In fact, 86% of respondents said that customer satisfaction was the most important metric for measuring. 82% said that feedback from customers and partners was the main source for these requirements. Project size, complexity, importance, and other factors affect how much is spent on collecting these requirements. So if it's a smaller firm of 5 employees compared to a giant corporation of multiple employees. Review charter, and for higher level requirements, scope and requirement plans, is kind of how you document that. This documenting could be a single piece of paper, or it could be a room full of notebooks. It just depends on the variables that we just discussed. RTM is a table that kind of lists these requirements and various attributes and status of the requirements to ensure that all these are kind of addressed. The next one is defining the scope. This is a detailed definition of the work that is required for the project. This kind of a project scope statement is created in the scope definition process. This includes description, user acceptance, kind of detailed information on all the deliverables and information, considering boundaries, constraints, and assumptions. Good scope definition is vital for project success, because it gives you an accuracy and measurement of time and baseline and cost for communicating clear work responsibilities. Main tools for this is expert judgment, data analysis, decision making, that sort of stuff. The project charter provides a basis for further defining the project scope. Like the last slide, concepts kind of vary, so it should go towards product scope description, user acceptance, and detailed information. As time progresses, this gets more clear and specific. An up-to-date project scope statement is important document for developing, confirming a common understanding of the project scope. So something to keep in mind working throughout this project. Moving on to the WBS, a work breakdown structure. A work breakdown structure is a deliverable-oriented grouping of the work involved in a project that defines its total scope. This kind of gives a basis for planning and managing project schedules, costs, resources, and changes. Because this is a total scope of the project, some experts believe that it should not be done if it's not included in the WBS. Cannot use project management software without a good one. Tasks in the WBS are not necessarily specifications, but kind of critical deliverables that need to be done. project management plan, documents, enterprise environmental factors, and organizational process. Assets are their primary inputs. Judgment is kind of the main tool or technique, which is decomposition. That is subdividing the project, deliverables into smaller and manageable pieces. To create a good one, you have to understand the project and its scope to incorporate the needs and knowledge of the requirements of the stakeholders. It's also very important to involve your whole team during this structure and part of this process. The approaches to WBS are using guidelines, the analogy approach, the top-down approach, the bottom-up approach, and the mind mapping approach. Moving on to validating scope. Scope validation involves formal acceptance of the completed project deliverables. This acceptance often is achieved by a customer inspection and kind of gives you the sign off. To receive this acceptance, the project must develop clear documentation of the project's products and procedures to evaluate if they were completed correctly and satisfactory. This is difficult on IT projects to verify the project scope and minimize these scope changes. Some know from the start that it's very unclear and they got to work closely with the customer and kind of move on from that part. Even when the project scope is fairly well defined, there's a thing with the project suffer from scope creep. This is the tendency for project scope to keep getting bigger and bigger. The inputs are the project documents, verified deliverables, and work performance. The tools is inspection and validation and decision-making techniques. Output is deliverables, change requests, work performance, that kind of stuff. Moving on to scope control, or controlling scope. This is inevitable on projects, especially changes to the scope of IT projects. Scope control involves managing changes to the project scope while keeping project goals and business strategy in mind. The goal of scope control is to influence the factors that cause scope changes to ensure that changes are processed according to procedures developed as part of integrated change control, and manage it when it happens. You cannot do a good job if you don't do an even better job of the processes mentioned before. Input, project documents, work performance data, organizational process assets, tools, data analysis, including variance analysis, and outputs, change request, work performance information, project plan updates, and project updates. And in conclusion, reasons why most IT projects fail is because there's a weak spot in these processes. Just go over those 6 processes again, or quickly mention. It is planning, scope management, collecting requirements, defining scope, creating a WBS, and validating scope. Thank you very much. That's all I have for you guys.